Hey, did you guys know this zone has a musical number? Hello! I'm currently going back and playing through all of World of Warcraft's old leveling content, starting in the Burning Crusade expansion, as it was the first, coming out in 2007. So far, I have gone through the 2 Draenei starting zones, Azure Mist Isle and Blood Mist Isle. Last time we went through the first Blood Elf starting zone, which is Eversong Woods, and now we are on to the follow-up zone, the Ghostlands. And I'm very, very excited. Talking about Eversong Woods and the Ghostlands is particularly timely at the moment, as we have just seen that in the upcoming expansion Midnight, we are getting a full rework of the entire region of quel'thalas, which both Eversong Woods and Ghostlands are a part of. So it's been really, really cool to go back and revisit these zones and have a look at all of the lore and sort of see where these places began before we get their updated versions coming out next year, right? It's coming out next year, I'm pretty sure. I should know these things. Anyway, we've got a lot to cover, so we're just going to jump straight into it. But very quickly before we start, as a reminder, we are playing through these zones with an arcane mage blood elf called Laurie Andril, who I love very, very much. I said last time that I was thinking of him as being a very Astarion-like character, and I do stand by that, but I also was thinking very like Lestat from Interview with a Vampire. That's my other inspiration. Do with that what you will. Anyway, let's get into it. Quick recap before we begin properly. We've just finished questing through Eversong Woods, where we were basically doing everything we could to preserve the life and beauty of that zone. After dealing with threats from the Wretched, the Scourge, and Alliance spies, we have been sent back to Fairbreeze Village, and it's there that our Ghostlands story properly begins. The Ghostlands themselves are the southern part of the Kingdom of quel'thalas, separated from Eversong Woods by the Elrindar River. I'm pretty sure, if that is correct, then go me for remembering that, because that's only mentioned like a couple of times, and that's just like up in my brain space. Originally, the whole area was called Eversong Forest, but it then got split in two as the southern part became rather dead and plague infested. It's very much overrun by the Scourge, the undead army led by the Lich King. We'll talk about him and the Scourge a little bit more later on, but probably not as in-depth as is deserving of the Lich King as a character, but he has a whole expansion dedicated to him. We don't need to talk about it very much right now. Magistrix Landra Dawnstrider tells us that her nephew was sent into the Ghostlands a few days ago and she hasn't heard from him yet. She sends us to go look for him and we find him on the path to the Ghostlands, actively falling unconscious, and accompanied by a Forsaken woman, Apothecary Thedra. The Forsaken are undead who were able to break free from the control of the Scourge and retake the kingdom of Lordaeron. To summarize the story far too quickly, they were basically shunned by the Alliance, and so they joined the Horde instead, and are led by Sylvanas Windrunner. And we're coming back to talk about her later on, don't worry. Thedra tells us that this guy is minutes away from the plague overtaking him, and sends us to the other side of the river to collect some plagued blood samples so that she can create a little serum to revive him. The plague in this instance is the plague of undeath. It was what was used to turn the Scourge into the Scourge in the first place. The serum that Thedra makes works, and the guy gets up and tells us he doesn't think he's gonna make it to his destination, so he sends us in his stead. We are to deliver a letter to Tranquillien, the main settlement in the Ghostlands. I really like Tranquillien. Like with the whole zone in its entirety, it's such a contrast from what we see in Eversong Woods. It's all of the same Blood Elf buildings and everything, but they are crumbling and ruined. They're covered in cracks and they're starting to become overrun with plants. The town is currently occupied by Blood Elves and Forsaken, the two groups working together to retake the forest the way that they retook their town. Cat's still here, he's just decided to curl up here. Why don't you want to curl up in the sun, you silly goose? We reach Arcanist Vandrel, who sees us and is like, hey, you didn't happen to see a courier on the way from Silvermoon, did you? And we're like, that's us now. We give him the letter, which apparently contains a warning of a dark presence in the Ghostlands. And Vandrel is like, yeah, no shit. So Vandrel sends us off to talk to High Executor Mavrin, who is the leader of the Forsaken contingent here in the Ghostlands. Mavrin, in turn, tells us about Dar'Khan the traitor, who is sort of indicated to be our end goal big boss guy in the zone. But before we can deal with him, we have a few other things we need to take care of. First, we're sent back to Vandrel, who asks us to take care of the Nerubian Scourge at Suncrown Village. The Nerubians, I'm sure, are very, very familiar to anyone who has played the War Within. They are the spider people, to put it very, very simply. They're one of the oldest races in the game, I believe. And during the initial growth of the Scourge, it was discovered that they were immune to the plague. However, they were still able to be of use to the Scourge, unfortunately, because they realized even though they couldn't get them while they were living, they could still make use of the Nerubians' dead bodies. So I believe that's what we're dealing with here at Suncrown Village. When we get there, we find a dying blood elf on the outskirts who tells us that the Nerubian leader, Anok Sutin, needs to be killed, so we do that. We then head back to Tranquillien to check in with Arcanist Vandrel. I forgot his name. He tells us that there are 2 more villages that we need to reclaim, starting with Golden Mist Village. Except Golden Mist hasn't been overtaken by Nerubians, it has been overtaken by the ghosts of the High Elves who used to live there, who have now been raised by the Scourge to threaten the remaining living Blood Elves. Ooh! Yikes! That's a yikes. Coming back to Tranquillien also opened up a whole lot more side quests for us to do, so let's run through those really quick. The Forsaken in charge of trade supplies needs us to go and retrieve his supplies after his cart was taken over by, in his words, a band of ghouls. Master Chef Moldir, the personal chef brought on by Dame Oriferos, more on her later, is very dramatically lamenting the lack of any actual decent food to work with, so he sends us off to go and get some crunchy spider legs, which he admits is disgusting, but is also sort of all he can work with right now in the Ghostlands. There's not exactly a lot of living things around. It's not called the Living Lands. There's a bounty out on some abominations, Knucklerot and Luzran, that are apparently extremely dangerous, and the game actually recommends that you group up with other players to do this. And this is foreshadowing for what will end up being one of my biggest struggles in this zone. But we're not talking about that yet. I dealt with Knucklerot and Luzran perfectly fine, despite being a very, very squishy little arcane mage. Magister Dorenis tells us that there is, amazingly, an actual functioning sanctum in the Ghostlands. Sanctums, if you recall, are the buildings that the Blood Elves use to tap into the arcane ley lines that run throughout the land and harness their magical power. The Sanctum of the Sun is our functioning one. However, we're not going there yet. Its sister sanctum, I guess, the Sanctum of the Moon, is in ruins. So we're sent to go and look through the debris there and find anything of use, basically. There's a bunch of gnolls nearby. They've taken over some mines to the southwest, and we need to go and take care of them. While we're there, we run into Apprentice Shatharia, who's been having some trouble gathering the ore that she needs, so she gets us to do it instead and tells us to take it to the Sanctum of the Sun. There's still plenty of Scourge hanging around the dead scar. Whoa. So we are asked to thin out their numbers a bit. And tying in with that, here's my least favourite quest in the whole zone. Magistrix Aminel asks us to get a whole lot of really gross things that she can make elixirs out of. And, like, sure, that's fine. Elixirs are great. I love it when people make things that help me, but oh my god, the respawn rates for these mobs were so low and the drop rates for the items were so low, so I just spent so long trekking up and down the dead scar and I did not enjoy myself. Finally, last side quest, Apothecary Renzathan, I did get it right, needs us to collect some Murloc spines to figure out why the Murlocs are still able to retain sentience despite being infected with the undead plague. We've got zombie Murlocs, but the quest doesn't go any further than that, and I'm really curious about it. I want to know more about the zombie Murlocs. I assume there's some up in Northrend and you get to hear about them in the next expansion, but for now I'm just left hanging. I mentioned Dame Oriferos before. She seems to be the leader here at at Tranquillien. Whilst Executive Mavrin is trying to sort of assert himself as the leader and call all the shots, Auriferos is very much reminding him, like, nah, nothing happens without me saying so first. She's constantly reminding him that, like, she gets the final say on all of their strategies and approaches to dealing with the Scourge. It's quite fun to just listen to them bicker. You can just stand around in their building in Tranquillien and they'll just be yapping at each other. It's really funny. She tells us about a group of night elves that have taken over a nearby island due to its proximity to a ley line nexus. We're talking about the ley lines again. Listen, I don't really know how the ley lines work. I know they get into it in Legion. That's a very far away. But it's something to do with arcane magic. I'm not gonna look into it. It's enough for me to just know that they're there. But this also does tie into what happened in Eversong Woods. We discovered a night elf scout working with a dwarven spy who were observing what was happening at the north and west sanctums in Eversong Woods. And in that quest, we discovered that the Alliance perceives what the Blood Elves are doing here at the sanctums with the ley lines to be dangerous and reckless. So we head to Anderoth nearby to do some scouting, and we specifically take note of these magical tree-like structures that have giant orbs on top of them. Auriferos listens to our report and decides that we need to be more upfront with our snooping, by which she means thievery. So we're sent off to Shalandis Isle, which is the island that the Night Elves have taken over, and we head there to steal some plans. We find 3 sets of plans, the most important of which talks about how the Night Elves are wanting to use moon-powered crystals to scry on the Blood Elves, the moon-powered crystals being the big orbs that we saw. We're asked to deliver these plans to quel'thalas, another one of these sort of ley line nexuses, and the only one not mentioned in the plans that we stole. We get to quel'thalas, we find 2 Forsaken Scouts and Magister Celasta, and they are all surrounded by Night Elf corpses. Apparently, what happened is the Night Elves showed up, summoned their big crystal, or conjured it, or whatever, but Magister Celasta was able to sneak back to the Sanctum of the Sun, which is just around the corner, get a whole lot of people to help out, and they all came in and ambushed the Night Elves. They ambushed the ambush, basically. But now all of the reinforcements have disappeared, and it's just Celasta and these 2 guards, and he's very freaked out and doesn't think that this is enough protection, so he's very grateful to see us, which is nice. He looks through the plans that we find and deduces that Anowen to the south, the 3rd of the ley line nexuses, what's the plural of nexus? Is it nexes? I don't know. It definitely has enough power for these moon crystals in the way that the other ley line nexuses apparently haven't. So we are sent off there to turn off the crystal, which we're able to do. Okay. Back to our Ghostlands village takeover questline. After our success in Golden Mist Village, we're sent off to Windrunner Village. Oh my god. We're told that a more powerful contingent of Scourge has sort of been operating out of here, and we are meant to be the spearhead of the defense. Nope, not the defense, the offense, by going in by ourselves and killing a bunch of baddies. We're also told that the Magisters at the Sanctum of the Sun want us to bring back any of the remains of the Scourge to be studied. And we're also asked by Mavrin to reclaim Windrunner Spire, the original home of Sylvanas Windrunner. Let's talk about her! This is so exciting. So Sylvanas is one of 3 Windrunner sisters, the other 2 being Illyria and Varisa. I believe they also have a brother, but I don't really know anything about him. Back in the day, Sylvanas was Ranger General of Silvermoon City, making her the leader of the Farstriders and generally a very important dude. When the Scourge invaded, Sylvanas was on the front lines, defending her people and her home until her very last breath. Except, turns out her very last breath wasn't her very last breath, because she was raised by the Lich King as a banshee, having to then serve the tyrannical man who killed her. It's a lot. Once she was able to break away from that control, she managed to gather up all the other undead that had sort of broken away from the Scourge, and together they formed the Forsaken, with her serving as their queen. There is a lot more to her story. She's one of the most infamous characters in the entire game. She's loved by so many, hated by a fair few after what her character went on to do, but undeniably iconic at the end of the day. She's one of my favorite characters personally. So while we're at Windrunner Spire, we find a necklace that has the inscription, To Sylvanas, love always, Illyria. Oh my god! Illyria, of course, being one of the aforementioned sisters. Both Illyria and Verisa are high elves that didn't take on the mantle of Blood Elf. Verisa, I believe, because she formed the Silver Covenant? Maybe? I don't know a lot about that. And Illyria, I think because at this point, was she still missing in Outland? Maybe? I don't know a lot about the lore of Illyria and Verisa. I know a little bit more about Illyria now that she's such a prominent figure in the current expansion, but if anyone knows more about the lore of them two and their individual stories, please put it in the comments because I would love to read that. Anyway, it's not really mentioned very much here, which is why I haven't done my own research on it. We take the necklace back to Mavrin at Tranquillien, and he's like, oh my god, you must take this to Sylvanas immediately. So we are sent to the Undercity, which is where Sylvanas leads the Forsaken. After getting very lost in the Undercity because I don't know my way around there, we give the necklace to Sylvanas, and she's shocked at first, but then her shock very quickly turns to anger, and she just tries to like dismiss it and is like, do you think this is amusing? And she says like, Illyria is nothing to me. What does she say? Oh, she says that Illyria is a long dead memory, and then she throws the necklace to the ground. But then she pauses for a moment, and then, oh my god, and then she summons these 4 highborn spirits, and together they all begin singing a song. It's called the Lament of the Highborne, and oh my god, it's so good! If you've never heard it, please go listen to it. It's on Spotify. It's in the Burning Crusade soundtrack. It is... I don't even have words for it. I'm going to talk about it more later. It's an incredible moment. It's so impactful and incredible and amazing. And yeah, I'll talk about it more later on. Anyway, once that's done, Sylvanas sighs, picks up the necklace, and that's the end of that quest line. It's so good.
What do you think? Do you think it's so good?
Anyway, back to the Ghostlands. We meet a guy called Ranger Lethvalen, who has been waiting for an audience with Mavrin, but he's gotten sick of waiting too long, and so he just sends us to deal with his business instead. Him and his Farstrider buddies were dealing with some Shadowpine trolls across the lake, but apparently something went wrong with the mission that they were on, and their lieutenant has like completely lost it. The lieutenant was leading their mission, and it went south, and a bunch of the Farstriders died, and he's not having a very good time dealing with that. So we meet up with Ranger Valana, who is not very happy with the lieutenant at the moment, and she sends us to just go and deal with the trolls instead. Some quick reminders. The Farstriders are the protectors of quel'thalas, comprised of rangers and led by the Ranger General. As I mentioned just before, Sylvanas used to be the Ranger General back when she was alive. Now I believe the Ranger General is Halderon? I think that's his name, and he's been the Ranger General for years now. I got a few comments last time talking about the difference between rangers and hunters because I was very confused by it, and these comments were amazing. I've got one here that says rangers are typically a high elven military designation for elite soldier, typically mixing marksmanship and magic, which I thought was a great point. I hadn't thought about the fact that the Blood Elves, being such magical arcane people, would be combining that with their affinity for bows. Another person said the difference between rangers and hunters is mainly the animal companionship. Hunters tend to have an innate connection to animals, while rangers focus more on their weaponry, usually bows for elves. And made the very good point that Rexar is the perfect example of a hunter, while the Windrunner sisters are perfect examples of rangers. I thought that was brilliant. That made it a lot more clear for me in my mind, having that distinction. And then this last one is, how many paragraphs is that? 6 paragraphs talking about the difference between rangers and hunters, going into a lot of the lore, mentioning some stuff that I didn't go into last time about the Eversong tree, I think. It's very, very small on my screen right now, but it's an amazing comment. It was amazing to read all of these comments, and I'm super grateful to everyone who did, because there's a lot of things in the lore that I either don't know super well or I'm just having to gloss over for time. So anyone who takes the time to write something out in the comments explaining anything a bit deeper, I am super, super appreciative of. The other little reminder I have is that the Shadowpine trolls are a sub-tribe of the Armani forest trolls, which is a huge huge, like, troll empire, basically, that used to be super powerful, and these days just has a lot of beef with the elves. So Sylvanas sends us to Farstrider Enclave on the southern shore of the lake to check in with Captain Helios. Him and a bunch of other people get us to kill a bunch of Shadowpine trolls and steal their weapons to be used in the upcoming battle against the Scourge. Notably, we kill the Shadowpine troll chieftain, Kelgash, in one of the troll settlements called Zebnawa, and while we're there, we also poison a bunch of their food. Now, the Ghostlands is actually home to a raid, Zul'Aman, but however, within the Ghostlands questline itself, there's nothing that actually leads you into Zul'Aman. It's just sort of there and is like the home base of all of the Armani trolls. So I'm not actually going to talk about the raid itself, other than just acknowledging that Zul'Aman is there. We might end up talking about it in another video, but at the moment, we're just sort of glossing past it. A guy called Krenin tells us that the lake that the Farstrider Enclave sits on the shore of is haunted by a bunch of vengeful spirits that have been there for as long as he can remember, which must be a long ass time because elves are old as shit. There was some incident years ago that caused a bunch of the townspeople to drown, and now their ghosts have just been hanging around. So Krenin sends us to put an end to their misery, which I have some questions about, because if we're able to just go and kill the ghosts and it's perfectly fine, why has nobody done this before? He mentions that their haunting cries serve as a constant reminder of their curse. Dog, just kill the ghosts! Anyway, whilst we're out killing the ghosts, we find a slightly more corporeal ghost called Garanus Whitemorn, who tells us that there used to be a ritual that everyone would do at Suncrown Village, which is the village where all the Nerubians are, to maintain the control over the creatures in the area. I found this very interesting because we hear about this sort of thing right back in Sunstrider Isle at the start of Eversong Woods, where Magistrix Arona tells us that because of the Scourge invasion, the Blood Elves have lost their ability to magically control the creatures in the area. So now in the Ghostlands we get to see that they accomplish this by doing rituals and stuff like that, which I thought was a cool way to sort of tie the lore together and expand upon it. Garanus tells us that this ritual involved summoning and enslaving a water elemental called a Quantien. But now, a Quantien has pulled an Uno reverse and enslaved all of the ghosts. So he gets us to go swimming and find all of the medallions that the people used to use during the ritual out from the bottom of the lake. Once we get them all, he tells us to go put them back at the bottom of the lake, but this time on an altar to summon a Quantien and kill him for good. It was also at this point that I ran into someone else playing through the zone and we stopped and had a cute little chat. So shout out to Honeybee if you happen to be watching this video. I doubt you are, but if you are, it was wonderful to chat with you, and I hope the rest of your quest went well. I sure wish you'd been around when I got to the end of the zone, but that's okay, we're not there yet. Ranger Vinner asks us to investigate some Armani catacombs because the trolls have apparently been coming back from the dead, and that's not good. Inside the catacombs we find Ranger Lilatha, who was captured, and we have to escort her back to Farstrider Enclave. Who doesn't love an escort quest? Farstrider Sedina tells us that a lot of the nearby wildlife is starting to be infected by the plague, unsurprising, and so we need to kill a bunch of lynxes, bats, and spiders to put a stop to it spreading any further. Okay, all throughout the quests up until this point, we have been constantly reminded about the looming threat of Deatholme. Deatholme is the base of all the Scourge forces in quel'thalas. It's where they began their march during the Scourge invasion, and is thus the beginning of the Dead Scar. Apparently all the Tranquillien forces who are wanting to do something about Deatholme are gathering at the Sanctum of the Sun. On our way there, we happen across Andalin Estate. Nope, Andalian Estate. I know how to say words. And a man there, Apprentice Vorel, he tells us that he was sent there to Andalian Estate to clear it out so that it can be turned into a little outpost in the upcoming fight against the Scourge. However, he says that if there's anything that he's learned in his time as an apprentice, it's the importance of delegating, especially when the tasks that have been delegated to you are ones that threaten your life. So he gets us to go and take care of all of the rampant beasties instead. With that done, we're finally able to make it back to the Sanctum of the Sun. And what do? As soon as we arrive at the Sanctum of the Sun, well, we're immediately sent back to the Farstrider Enclave. And we have to go talk to Ranger Vinna again, who was the one who sent us into the catacombs. And she tells us some more about Dar'Khan. So I mentioned him near the beginning as the one who was sort of made out to be the big baddie of this zone. Dar'Khan was a high elf who used to reside in Dawnstar Spire. Is that right? Yeah, where he spent his time, as Ranger Vinna puts it, scheming against his own people. We head up there, up to Dawnstar Spire, and we find his journal, which is just full of all of these hateful and contemptuous writings, and many, many plans and plots and schemes. It even mentions plans about stealing the power of the Sunwell to use for the Scourge, which of course we know did happen and was the end goal of the Scourge invasion, and is like the reason that these lands have been completely wrecked. We're then asked to take this journal back to the Sanctum of the Sun. We're then told that the journal mentions two important artifacts, the Stone of Light and the Stone of Flame, which have both been imbued with the power of the Sunwell. These artifacts are being held in the Bleeding Ziggurat and the Howling Ziggurat, respectively. Fun fact! I literally learned this morning, looking through the wiki when I was doing some research on the Scourge. The Ziggurat buildings, we see them quite a few times throughout World of Warcraft generally. There's a few of them in the Plague Lands, they're here in the Ghostlands, and obviously there's quite a few in Northrend. They were originally Nerubian buildings. This might be really obvious to people, but I only put it together here. So they were originally Nerubian and they were just taken over by the Scourge and repurposed, basically. When I read this, I was like, oh my god, that's why the City of Threads looks like that. This might be really silly of me to only just be making this connection now, but I remember even thinking the first time that I flew in to Azj-Kahet and looking around being like, there's like weirdly Scourge-looking buildings. And I know my Scourge-looking buildings, I play a Death Knight. I've connected the dots now. I'm probably the last person in the game who has connected these dots. But I found that very interesting. Maybe you will too. Anyway, it's time to march on Deatholme. We're tasked with freeing captives, killing some important bad guys, and bringing back Dar'Khan's head. Okay. This was a struggle for me. The whole Deatholme experience was very, very epic. That's the best word that I can think of to use. The place is huge and it is swarming with enemies, and the whole time you really do feel like you're fighting your way through. The quest to kill Dar'Khan himself is recommended to have 5 players doing it. Now, usually when there is like group recommended content in the game, it's 3 players. And to me, especially with older content, seeing the like recommended 3 players is an indication that I can do this quest by myself. It's just going to be a little bit harder and I maybe need to be a little bit smarter about it. 5 players? Oh boy! Oh no. And now sure, whilst I may have been lucky earlier on running into the wonderful Honeybee, who I had a great chat with, and there were some other characters that I ran into on the Dead Scar, at this point in my playthrough, there was nobody else in the entire zone. And I checked back in quite a few times, and there was never anybody else in the zone. It was always just me. And I was too low of a level to even use Group Finder. And I could have gone to Orgrimmar and gone into trade chat and been like, hello, can anybody help me? But I was too scared to do that. So I tried to solo Dar'Khan like 4 times. And listen, I love playing an Arcane mage. I'm not usually a caster person, but I've been really getting into it with Loriandril. But Loriandril, the level 28 Arcane mage, cannot solo Dar'Khan the traitor. So my solution was to just keep this quest in the back of my quest log and move on to the next zone for a while until I was a high enough level to come back and kill him really easily. But, and this is where I messed up. Because I started the Burning Crusade Time Walking campaign, as soon as I started that, it leveled all of the other content, which meant the Ghostlands didn't cap at level 30 anymore. The Ghostlands now capped at level 71. And I didn't realize this until I had fully nearly finished Hellfire Peninsula. I was at level 34 and I was like, oh yeah, surely I can give it a go now. Like, I'll only be 4 levels above him, but maybe that'll be enough. And then I checked in the map and it said level 71. And I was like, no! But I refused to accept defeat. I'm a very stubborn person. So I was like, f it, I've got more spells now. I know how to play the class a little bit better. I'm still not great, but I'll give it a go. And I will admit that this was largely also out of embarrassment because I feel like that was a really stupid mistake to make. Anyway, miraculously, it took me a decent amount of time and I was more tense than I have ever been in my entire life, but I did manage to do it. And genuinely, this might be the most satisfied I have ever been in this game. Ever. I've been playing it for like 19 years now. Anyway, back to the actual story of the zone. Once we have Dar'Khan's head, we are instructed to take it to Lor'themar Theron in Silvermoon City. We don't actually get told a lot about Lor'themar Theron here in this quest line, so I'm not going to go into him a huge amount, but he is the Blood Elf leader at the moment, and I'm a little bit in love with him. And I think a lot of people are. If you say that you're not in love with Lor'themar Theron, you're lying. Because look at him. Oh my god. And especially after that midnight cinematic, hello. Anyway. He is surprised but pleased at this development of Dar'Khan being dead. So he sends us back to the Undercity to see Sylvanas to hopefully spread the news that Dar'Khan is now dead. Or Deadkhan. Ooh, which one's better? Probably Deadkhan. That was stupid. And he's hoping that this will dissuade any lingering doubts about the Blood Elves officially joining the Horde. There's also a little PS at the end of the letter that he sends with us that says, hold on, let me read this. Our Grand Magister has received word back from Outland regarding Thrall's question. The answer is, with great certainty, yes. Intriguing. Now that I've played a little bit into Hellfire Peninsula, I think I get what this is about, but it's a very, ooh, sort of way to end that letter. Anyway, we take that letter to Sylvanas, and she tells us all about how she has fought tooth and nail for the Blood Elves to be included and recognized as part of the Horde. And then she sends us to Orgrimmar to see Sourfang. We're seeing all the important characters today. This is so exciting. He comments on Sylvanas' persistence, but ultimately has to acknowledge how amazing we are. And he admires all that we've done in our journey, combating the betrayals of the Alliance and everything with the Scourge. Apparently, our worthiness is no longer in question. Hell yeah. He officially welcomes us to the Horde and sends us back to Silvermoon City. And at this point, I'm so glad that I'm playing a mage who has a teleport Silvermoon City spell, because we're really just bouncing around the place. And with that, the Ghostlands is officially complete. Yay!
Isn't that exciting?
He's very excited. What a zone! Oh my god. I feel like this zone is kind of understated. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but I've been having trouble articulating my feelings about it. The Ghostlands is a zone that can feel quite slow at times to play through. A lot of the quests have really high kill requirements and very low drop rates. And oh my god, did I spend a lot of time going up and down the Dead Scar to do that one quest. But whilst this would be a very easy thing to complain about, and I wouldn't necessarily judge anyone who did so, I can't help but feel that it works for the zone. The long stretches of time that you spend out in the wild, hunting spiders and killing Scourge, it gives you time to really sit in the tragedy and discomfort of the zone. It's such an intense contrast to Eversong Woods, to the elegance and the opulence and the warmth that those people are still clinging to. Here in the Ghostlands, there's nothing left to cling to. Their forces are spread thin and they're desperately trying to make a stand and reclaim their home, whilst also lamenting about the fact that they were not built for war. It's very sad. And seeing the way that the buildings are crumbling and falling to ruin and overrun with enemies when you've just come from Eversong Woods, it's such a stark contrast. And it's a constant reminder all the time about what all of this used to be like and what these people have now lost. What they're still actively losing, with Deatholme active and terrifying at the base of the Dead Scar. I think pairing the Blood Elves up with the Forsaken was a brilliant move. At first they seem like such opposites, like the Blood Elves are beauty and grace, and then the Forsaken are literally dead people who are falling apart. Some of them don't even have jaws. But they're undeniably linked by tragedy. Both groups have had their lives utterly wrecked and transformed by the Scourge, and now they're working together to reclaim their independence and any semblance of home they can still find. Speaking of home, Sylvanas' story haunts the zone beautifully, and the payoff of the Lament of the Highborne, oh my god. Honestly, one of my favourite moments I've ever experienced in the game. Especially because the melody of that song is part of the Blood Blood Elf music that plays throughout Eversong Woods and the Ghostlands. Her story is literally haunting the narrative from the moment you step foot onto Sunstrider Isle. It's incredible! This zone is sad and slow and quiet. Every inch of it is leaking tragedy and loss, but the people here are still shining with determination and, against everything, hope. Beset with such terrifying odds, they're refusing to give up. And I think that's very, very cool. Things that I love, I want to do this quickly. I don't have very many things, which is not to say that I didn't love this zone. I just have not as much to talk about. I loved the Armani catacombs. I feel like this is a weird one to start on, but it's not something I've seen a lot of in the game, and I thought the design was really, really cool. Even if the escort quest out of there was annoying as fuck. Obviously, I loved the contrast to Eversong Woods. Oh my goodness, I could talk about it forever. Something in particular that I really like is the colors, and something that I noticed is that it's the flip side of the color palettes of Azure Mist and Blood Mist. Azure Mist was all like blue and purple, and then Blood Mist was all like red and pink. With this, we've got Eversong is very like, okay, I say yellow, but like it's got the red and everything, the red and the pink, and then the Ghostlands is all blue, and it's like, I see what you did there. The music! Oh my god! Okay, obviously I loved the music in Eversong Woods. I talked about that a bit then. And the Ghostlands, it's all of the most haunting parts of the Eversong Woods music, just as the Ghostlands is all of the most haunting parts of Eversong Woods. I got a few great comments about the music in Eversong Woods as well that I want to talk about really quickly. This comment mentioned that what makes the Blood Elf music work so well is that they're only using warm toned instruments, brass, cellos, trumpets, and that all fits with the color scheme of the zone as well, which I thought was brilliant. I'd never considered that. And then this, I think this is my favorite comment on the whole video. Stephen Walker, thank you Stephen Walker, commented saying that there's a ton of musical storytelling going on in Eversong in general, but the best example can be found in the Silvermoon City music. I'm not going to read the whole comment out, but it was such a cool insight, and it's comments like this that just get me so excited that there are other people out there thinking about these zones in the same way that I do, and having this like really cool, insightful knowledge about specific things, and it's so cool. I loved how much the quests built up to Deatholme. It's kind of like how in Blood Mist Isle everything built up to the Vector Coil. Here in the Ghostlands everything was building up to Deatholme, and you're reminded about it and about Dar'Khan constantly throughout the quest, and that's very, very cool. This is a silly one. Farstrider Sylvanas, after you've assaulted Zebnawa, says that you should talk to the captain about joining up as a Farstrider, and this would be a perfectly normal comment to make. I just thought it was really funny to be saying that to my fruity little mage. He is not becoming a Farstrider. Look at that man. That man doesn't know how to hold a bow. There was another mage-specific quest. As I mentioned in the Eversong video, I love when they do class-specific things, and I got a really good comment about this as well. Fantasticat mentioned that this is actually one of the leftover quests from vanilla, when there used to be little quests for every class, which I very vaguely remember. But apparently there's a few that have been left in the game, and this is one of them, and there's another one in the Ghostlands where you get a robe, and I thought that was neat. In general, I really liked the flow of the questing. I really liked the way that Tranquillien remained as the base that you constantly came back to, but doing all of the quests in the 3 villages and then everything at the Farstrider Enclave, all building up to Deatholme, I really liked the way that it flowed. I did do it slightly out of order because I did everything at the Farstrider Enclave first, and I'm pretty sure you're meant to do that after you do like all of the village quests, but that's fine. I enjoyed myself. All of the Windrunner lore. Oh my goodness. I think Sylvanas and the other Windrunner sisters are some of the most interesting characters in the game. As I mentioned, there is a lot I don't know about them, and I would be so thrilled if anyone wants to go on any tangents in the comments, but I think it's such... I just keep coming back to the word haunting. The way that Windrunner Village and Windrunner Spire sit there full of ghosts, and you hear the name Windrunner and it's like, oh my god, I know that name, and I have so many feelings about it. The Lament of the Highborne! Oh my god! I don't even have proper words for this. It's so good. I don't know how I first discovered it, because this was my first time actually playing through the quest that leads up to it. I mentioned last time that before now I'd only played through about half of the Ghostlands, so I'd never actually done this quest, but I must have heard it on YouTube or something, or I listened to it on the soundtrack, because I listen to the soundtrack a lot, and it has stuck with me for years. I think it's one of the most beautiful bits of music that they've put into the game. And to have it as a payoff at the end of this quest is it's just incredible. And you don't have to stick around and listen to it. But if you do, it's such an incredible moment of emotional storytelling. Related to the Lament of the Highborne, you can get a lyric booklet afterwards, which I think is really cute. And it has the translation, which is basically being like, children of the blood, and saying that the enemies are near, and all of this stuff. And it's quite sad. It's a sad song. I love that Tranquillien randomly gets attacked by the Scourge every now and then. I think that's neat. It adds to the whole atmosphere of the people there just doing their best to try and defend this tiny little sanctuary that they have. I liked the build up to Dar'Khan, and I liked the inclusion of Dar'Khan because I did a little bit of research. When I do these videos, I'm trying not to do too much research into stuff that isn't directly mentioned within the zones, because these are like zone recap lore videos, you know? I'm not doing an entire rundown of the history of the Blood Elves here. But I did get a bit distracted looking through Dar'Khan's wiki page, because he's been a central antagonist in media outside of the games. I don't know, was it a comic? Maybe. I don't know. He's a very, very important lore figure, and I thought including him here was really, really cool. And I think I read that apparently he's been mentioned a few times recently in the game, like in the War Within. I don't know if that's true. Feel free to leave a comment about it if you do know. I loved the zombie murlocs, and I'm really, really sad that we didn't get to hear more about them other than just going to collect their spines, because I want to know more about them. And then finally, I really like Chef, what's his name? Chef Moldier, because he's just so dramatic. And I like when they let NPCs be a little bit silly, and that's the vibe that I got with him. He's just a silly little guy. He's very, very dramatic, and having to cook spiders. He does give you the cooked spiders afterwards. I thought that was nice. That is all that I have to talk about with the Ghostlands. No! I enjoyed myself in this zone. Oh, like, obviously, it was quite slow at times, and those goddamn drop rates of those quests drove me crazy. But I think the lore and the story and the atmosphere of this zone really, really stood out to me, and it's not one that I'm going to forget anytime soon. But in saying that, the next zone is Hellfire Peninsula, which I am super, super excited about. However, it is going to take me a little bit longer to make the Hellfire Peninsula video, because I essentially have to play through the whole thing twice to get both the Horde and Alliance side of the story. And whilst this does mean that it'll be a slightly longer video, which could be pretty cool, it will be a little bit more of a wait before I get that one out. However, I do have another video to put out in the meantime, but it is not a World of Warcraft related video. It's just going to be a silly little video of me essentially gossiping about all of the drama that's happening in my current Sims game. And I understand that that is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but if you are someone who likes the vibe of these videos, you like me just yapping about stories and getting unreasonably passionate and enthusiastic about things that don't matter very much, or if you're someone who likes the Sims games, then you might enjoy this video, and I highly recommend checking it out when it comes out, because it's just going to be fun and silly.
Look who's back!
But then after that, there is the Hellfire Peninsula video to look forward to. I've already started playing through the zone. I am loving it so far, and I'm really, really excited to share all of that with you. Oh god, the cat's trying to escape out the window. Buddy, don't do that. Cat. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording before he breaks something. Bye! Hi, I'm actually back. There was one thing that I was going to mention at the end of that video and then completely forgot about, but it's actually quite important. So one of the things, obviously, that I talked about was not being able to group up with players to do the Dar'Khan quest at the end of the quest line. And I was thinking about this, and hopping into Outland now and doing the Burning Crusade content, there's obviously a lot of grouped content sort of on the horizon. There's lots of dungeons, there's lots of raids, and I want to be able to go and do all of those and talk about them, but I also sort of need to be doing that content with people who are going to be okay with me going in and taking time to read all of the quest text and write my notes and really like observe and appreciate everything. So I was going to put it out there. If anybody is interested in helping me out with doing that group content, help out and do some dungeons and raids while I'm getting the footage for the videos, I think that would be so, so cool. And I have no idea how we would go about setting this up, but I wanted to sort of garner interest basically and see if it's something that people were keen on. Leave a comment if you are, and I will try and sort something out. At the moment I am playing on Oceanic servers, specifically Armenthal, because I'm in New Zealand, so Oceanic servers, which I know a lot of people don't play on. But I don't know, it could be cool, it could be fun, if it's something that people are interested in. If not, that's fine, I'll figure it out. Anyway, that's all. I need to get back to editing this now, because it is a beast of a video.